Assalamu alaikum students. Today's topic is place of poetry in English literature. And the objectives of this lecture are to enable students to develop an understanding about genre of poetry, get an understanding about different type of poetry, attain information about various linguistic devices, acquire knowledge about kinds of stanza, and create rhythms of poetic language and music. So, what's poetry? So poetry has remained popular form of literary conventions, therefore is often referred to as the crown of literature. So a form of art in which language is used for its aesthetic and evocative qualities with or without its apparent meaning. And mainly when we read poetry, we face much more difficulty to understand what actually poet wants to say. When you read out poetry, prose is quite understandable when you read it, but to understand poetry is a difficult task. That's why it is a crown of literature, and it is a form of art in which language is used for its aesthetic and evocative qualities with or without its apparent meanings. And mostly what actually apparent meaning shows may or may not be the same as someone understand it. So it is derived from the Greek word poiesis, meaning making or creating. It often uses particular form and conventions to expand the literal meaning of the words or to evoke emotional or sensual response. So poetry is a type of writing that uses language to express imaginative and emotional qualities instead of or in addition to meaning. So we have discussed in our last day session that poetry actually deals with emotional gestures or emotional qualities of the reader as well as the writer. So poetry may be written as individual poems, are included in other written forms as in dramatic poetry, hymns, or song lyrics. Wordsworth defines poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So one of the definition that's being used or being said by most of the person that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Samuel Johnson says the end of writing is to instruct, and the end of poetry is to instruct by pleasing. Robert Frost says that a poem begins with a lump in the throat, a homesickness, or a love sickness. It is a reaching out towards expression and effort to find fulfillment. A complete poem is one where the emotions has found its thought and the thought has found the words. So when we talk about poetry, so poetry is one where emotions has found its thought and thought has found the words. So emotional aspect or emotional or powerful feelings are there when someone is going to write poetry. Poetry has a major purpose, and one of the major purpose of poetry is to express ideas, feelings, and emotions. So you can use poetry to express your ideas, feelings, and emotions. And a major part of poetry includes these three things. When poetry came into existence and when poetry starts, many ancient works from the Vedas to Odyssey appears to have been composed in poetic form to aid memorization and oral transmission in prehistoric and ancient societies. Likewise, the oldest surviving poem is the Epic of Gilgamesh from the 3rd millennium BC in Sumer, Mesopotamia, and now said to be Iraq, which was written in cuneiform script on clay tablets and later papyrus. So there's a poem. The oldest surviving poem is Epic of Gilgamesh, which is written in 3rd millennium BC. Other ancient epic poetry includes the Greek epics Iliad and Odyssey and Indian epics Ramayana and Mahabharata. These are books are written in poetic form. अजीज तलबा उम्मीद है कि इस टॉपिक के अंदर कवर किए गए तमाम सवालात के बारे में आपको समझ आ गई होगी। अब नए सेशन में नए टॉपिक के साथ दोबारा से मुलाकात होगी। तब तक के लिए मेरी तरफ से अल्लाह हाफिज़। अल्लाह आप तमाम का हामी और नासर हो।